Most people think a car rental business is a side hustle or some risky Turo gamble. It's not. A rental car business is one of the cleanest small asset plays that you can make if you really understand the numbers behind it. Because when you really break it down properly, your car rental business can generate anywhere from 25 to 30% margins, even if you don't own any vehicles on the fleet. And if you're running a smaller operation, you might even have higher margins than that. Because when you break it down properly, looking at one car at a time, they can make around 30% margins, bring predictable monthly cash flow, and scale into a real fleet business, but only if you structure it correctly. So in this video, I'm breaking down the real unit economics when it comes to the car rental business. I'm going to be going over things line by line to show you how much cars make, what kind of expenses are involved when running your business, and what the actual bottom line looks like, and exactly how long it takes to hit a return on investment. By the end, you're going to understand how the numbers work, how to run this business, and how to do it intelligently. Now, as a disclaimer, I signed out of my LLC business partnership. I was bought out by my business partner in September of 2025. So the data I have is very limited. I do have spreadsheets on most of the vehicles that were in operation. Some of the data is scattered, so I don't have the exact dashboards or the accounting software to show everything line by line. But in this video, you're gonna get a really good idea of what cars can make. And I'm gonna show you things from bank statements that include expenses, that include money coming in, money leaving. You're gonna see ending balances at the end of the month, and you're going to see how profitable this business can actually be if you run it correctly. All right, let's go ahead and dive right into it. So in this video, we're gonna be going over specifically the month of May in 2025, just because the bank statements show a good amount of activity, and so we can cleanly break down what is going on in May of 2025 with the car rental business. I will note that not everything, again, because I don't have access to the accounting dashboard anymore, that there's a lot of cash payments. There's also accounts receivable that are not accounted for that month because we didn't get paid for it that month. This is with wholesalers and brokers and sometimes long-term clients as well. They pay on a different timeline. So that data is not included. And then there are obviously some expenses that get paid with cash and stuff as well, but you'll get a general good idea of what's going on. All right, so let's dive into it. The first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to pull up the bank statement. All right, so here we are. We are looking at the month of May, right? So you can see the business name. Now you can see our beginning balance at the beginning of the month. You can see our ending balance or our deposits and credits in the bank account, and then you can see withdrawals. What are the withdrawals in the business? They're not just me going in, taking money out of the business account. These are Zelle payments to our investors. This includes our credit card payments, which is where a lot of expenses are. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the credit card statements, but you can get a general idea of roughly what our expenses run. And then obviously our ending balance at the end of the month. Now, some of our payouts do roll over to the beginning of June. And so this is not a full reflective number, but obviously you can see, month to month and our average ledger balance, right? Obviously a very profitable business. We don't inject any of our own capital into this business. And at the time of this bank statement, we owned literally just a few cars, which were mostly Turo vehicles. And a lot of these are just investor vehicles, right? And so if we dive into this bank statement here, we can flex all the deposits. There's obviously some good Turo deposits, but then we also have, also wholesale. So we have wholesale, we have Turo deposits, and we have wholesale meaning like Zells, cash, stuff like that from brokers. And then we have our Intuit QuickBooks, which is how we invoice customers. So majority of our private rentals are processed through QuickBooks. And so when you see Intuit deposit, that's what that is referring to. So obviously you can see, we're still here in the first week of May. We have a good amount of Intuit deposits, which is all private rentals. We have some Turo deposits, and then we have Zelle payments from people that were brokering our vehicles, meaning other exotic car rental companies that were using our inventory to rent to their customers, obviously with us allowing it. Counter credit, this is a deposit from a check. This was from a broker as well. We had the largest inventory in really Southern California in-house for the exotic fleet. So we get a lot of companies that broker from us and broker our inventory. This is something that I go over with my students as well. So yeah. Here we go. These are the kind of the rough numbers. This is a big deposit from Turo, but again, we have also very large deposits from QuickBooks, meaning private rentals. And then here's another check that comes through. Merchant bank, this is another processor. This is probably through Clover, which is another processor we use when we take security deposits. So any charges that came from security deposits or that we managed through another processor are also reflected here. Again, just a lot of good deposits. Now these are transfers to other bank accounts. And then now these are obviously very complex statements to go over. Here's another big deposit from private rentals, right? And so we can go down this whole list, and then we can go through kind of some of our withdrawals. calls, but let me dive into some of the vehicles for the month of May. So I have spreadsheets for most of the investor vehicles that I was able to get before leaving the business. So I have a lot of data I can go off. So that's what we're gonna go into right now. So here we are getting into the car spreadsheets. What I'm gonna do for the purpose of this video, I'm gonna open up these big spreadsheets, which is pretty much what all the numbers produce for some of these vehicles. And I think most of the vehicles are on here. Any vehicles that we owned directly on the fleet, some economy cars and other cars are not gonna be reflected in these spreadsheets because we didn't have to do reporting to investors. These are the spreadsheets that we use to report to investors so they can see their number. So anything that was in-house was just in the accounting software, which again, I don't have access to anymore, but we're gonna dive right into it. So we are going to go for the Ferrari 488 Spider. There's previous cars here as well that we don't have on the fleet anymore, but this is one that was obviously active in the month of May for 2025. So I think we had just gotten this car for the month of May. This is the Ferrari 488 Spider. It was a red one. We obviously didn't receive, we received the car this day from the owner because I think we told them we had a rental this day. And so we didn't even have it for the full month of May. Now, the owner on this gets a 65% cut. RE rate means Rent Exotics, which is the name of my previous business. We took a 35% cut on this vehicle for various reasons. This was referred to by another investor who had multiple vehicles on the fleet. And so as we started getting further into business, we got less and less cars at 50-50, which seems counterintuitive, but we had a lot of very invested investors that were ready to buy vehicles for other locations and pretty much were available at our disposal for any vehicles that we wanted at any time that we needed them. And so they got a more favorable split, right? So if we're going down on the spreadsheets here, you can see this car had 4 rentals through the whole month of May. So the owner made $3,379.12. That is how much we paid them out as for the company. So let's go ahead and type in Ferrari 488 Spider. The total net that we break down here in these spreadsheets is after fees. So these are processing fees that we take out. So we do the payment after any processing fees, and then, we split it based off of this net income. And then you can see how much we made on each rental. Even on over mileage, we collect some money as well. So the total net for this is going to be, this car for the month of May earned $5,198.65. Obviously we didn't have it for the full month. Once again, the owner took away $3,379.12. And that means our company made $1,819.53. This is essentially our gross profit before any of our operating expenses. If you were a one-man operation and you had almost no overhead, this would be a profit on the one car that you had for 2/3 of the month. The next car we're gonna take a look at is our McLaren 600 LT Spider. We also had this on the month of May. This car is on a 50-50 split. Again, same deal. So as you can see here in the spreadsheet, this car, the owner made $5,644.80. Now this owner in particular, and a lot of owners did this, they would rent cars from our fleet. So we would just subtract that balance from their total. So they would rent the Huracán Evo and the Urus, whatever it might be. And so we would subtract that. But the gross number that the owner would have made if he didn't rent any cars from us is $5,644.80. That means the total net on this car was $11,289.60. Again, this car was on a 50-50 split. So the owner took away $5,644.80. And by default, that is actually what we also made because it was a 50-50 split. So on this one vehicle, we made a good amount of profit, as you can see, $5,600 roughly. If you don't have any overhead, you're running, just a couple cars. This is very, very, very good return, right? And so we're having to deal with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rentals. What we paid for the car wash, let's say we theoretically washed it in between every rental, was about $25 per wash. This is a hand wash done by a mobile detailer. So we didn't really have to spend much on labor to get this done. And we didn't have to essentially get our hands dirty and wash the cars ourselves. So car washes alone, we can even make some, an expenses tab here. Again, these are just some rough numbers to give you a general idea, but if we wash it between every rental, we spent $150 just washing the car. Now, let's say theoretically we used labor. We were paying our employees somewhere around $20 an hour. Let's say we had to use 1 hour of labor for every rental. That would put us at $120. And that would bring us to a grand total of $270 in expenses for this vehicle. I'm just gonna do math in my head. This is not the exact numbers, right? But around $5,400. This is with you not washing the car. This is with you not even delivering the car or doing anything like that. And the reason I average 1 hour is some of them are pickups at our location, so there's not much labor required. Some of them might be pickup and drop off, so those will take a little bit more time. It probably averaged to about an hour per vehicle. So, you know, we're doing $5,400 just on this one vehicle without really doing anything. Now, there was also a parking expense. Our parking expenses per car was about $150 per spot in an underground gated secured parking garage. So we can bring that down to, we can go back and add that in here. And now let's also throw in maybe $150 for Ubers as well. That brings our grand total for this McLaren 600 LT Spider for the month. No labor, covered parking, Ubers, lifts, pretty much most expenses involved. We're still making $5,000 profit on this one car doing 6 rentals, and we're really not doing anything. The most amount of work, if you don't have a virtual assistant, is going to be verifying insurance. A lot of these are just our regular customers. We've already verified them in the past. Then sending contracts and coordinating, really barely taking any time, right? And so if we go back even on this, now what you have to notice, at this point in time, we had about 30 cars on the fleet, and we only did about 10 parking spaces, right? And so the fixed expenses and the variable expenses, they're not per unit. So we only paid for 10 parking spots because most of the time we never had more than 10 cars sitting. And so you cannot put a parking expense, and I'm not gonna go through 30 vehicles in this video, but you can't put a parking expense on every single vehicle. It just wouldn't make sense, right? And so even on this one for the Ferrari, I forget how many rentals it was, but you know, if you subtract a few dollars from the cut, maybe even $400, you're still making $1,400. And what you have to keep in mind is this is if you're not doing everything yourself. If you're in the starting stages doing everything alone, maybe you don't even have covered parking expense, or these numbers right here are mostly your profits. And so I'm just throwing these random numbers in, taking $400 out for expenses just to be realistic, right? And then we also had an office expense, which was also a fixed expense, which you don't really need until you're growing a bigger operation as well. There is no insurance cost for these vehicles. The owner pays the insurance, the owner pays the maintenance. Unless we miss something that was critically our fault, which our processes at this time were pretty much bulletproof and that was not happening, then there might be some extra expenses, but no insurance, literally no other expenses, just labor, getting the car to and from, car washes, covered parking, and then we have other expenses, obviously accounting expenses. We have, which is just like a QuickBooks subscription and maybe paying the accountant some money. And then you're gonna have things like DocuSign and other small things that start to add up over time. This is when you're running a bigger operation. When you're running a smaller operation, with the help of AI, you can negate most of these expenses. And so this is really just to get you an idea, more for beginners, of how to essentially break down these numbers. And you know, when we were starting, we really didn't have any expenses at all. We were doing everything ourselves. We would drive each other to and from, so maybe a little bit of gas. And these were like the kind of numbers that we were taking home in the beginning. Now, if you're an operator and you're at a larger scale, I can help you break this down to refine it, to automate your systems, to look at your bottom line and how we can kind of implement that throughout your business. But for the sake of this video, let's keep it rolling. So next, we've got the Porsche 911. Now we're looking at a Porsche 911. You're like, why is a Porsche 911 on a 3565? This guy at one point had like 9 cars with us. At the time of this video, I think it was a little bit less, but at the end of the day, it was a negotiated deal, right? Because he brought us a bunch of vehicles. And so we went down on the 50-50 split. Now, looking at these numbers over here, this was the month of May. As you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rentals. So not very labor intensive, not that much work to do. The car, his split was $3,167.87. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this over here. So the total that this Porsche 911 brought in was $4,873.65. Now the company cut, which is us, $1,705.78. Again, we can throw random numbers for expenses. I'm not gonna do it for everything, especially if you are a beginner getting into this business, you're really gonna have not much overhead whatsoever. And so we're just gonna run with these numbers right now for the sake of it. This is not bad for managing 5 rentals. What I will note is that all these cars that I am breaking down in this video have no acquisition costs involving them. They are all investor vehicles, consignment vehicles, meaning other people specifically purchase these vehicles. We put them under contract for a revenue split, and that is how we acquired the vehicles. We did not pay any down payment. We don't make payments. We don't pay insurance, maintenance, or anything. Someone else buys the car. We manage it just like a property manager. We do all the renter verification, license screening, insurance screening, making sure that the check-in, check-out process goes smooth, handling all the logistics, and then literally just paying the owner a cut of what the vehicle earns. So there's absolutely no acquisition cost when it comes to this particular breakdown. Now let's jump into the next vehicle. Okay, now we're gonna dive into the 911 Carrera 4S that we had. Now the spreadsheet on this one's a little bit messy. It got cut off, maybe as you can see, probably when I was editing other months. And so the owner on the 911 Carrera 4S made about $1,500 for the month. What you have to notice is that when you're dealing with vehicle owners, sometimes they block off vehicles. Some vehicles vehicles go down for maintenance part of the time. So some of these numbers are not fully reflective of the full potential of certain vehicles. And some vehicles will do really, really well one month and they'll do really, really bad one the next month. And so for this in particular, the owner may have blocked the car off and driven it. I don't remember the cause of why these numbers are a little bit lower, but at the end of the day, the owner did make $1,500 roughly. That means the net on this was about $2,300. And that means that the company cut was about $800 and there was not much rental activity. This was a couple of rentals. So even if you paid for car washes, maybe 60 bucks, what was it? Yeah, there was 3 rentals. So even if you paid the car wash, 60 bucks, you did it all yourself, you're still making like $700 on this car. Not bad for 3 rentals. Maybe you vacuumed it in your lot and you really didn't spend much time at all doing this. If there was delivery fees, we did not include the delivery fees in these spreadsheets that you see. So the spreadsheets that we're working with the investor vehicles, we don't include total collected. The delivery fee is a service fee that we keep. And so that is not reflected. And so these numbers are probably a little bit inaccurate and they probably offset a lot of the labors or Uber expenses as well. So these numbers might be actually a little bit higher. So when we're looking at lower numbers like this, if there were any deliveries involved, which usually we would charge 120, 60 bucks each way, those numbers are not reflected here. The next vehicle, some of these vehicles here are like aged out, so they're not even in operation during this time. We're gonna look at our Lamborghini Huracán Evo Spider. This was one of the best performing vehicles that we had. I don't think the month of May for this car for 2025 was like a stellar month, but it did do some good numbers here, it looks like. And so obviously there's a lot more work involved with these cars because it did have a lot of rentals. And so it looks like the owner's cut was $7,000, let's just call it $7,300. So we've got Huracán Evo Spider. Again, this is not by far not the best performing month the car's had. This is May, which is typically in San Diego not the busiest month. It's an average month, to be honest. Let's call it about $11,200. I'm doing a little bit of rounding, minus $20, $30. And then that means the company's cut on this is going to be close to $4,000 is what the company made on this. Again, expenses might vary. If there's deliveries, those are usually kind of offset by delivery fees, maybe some car washes. Even if you do 10 car washes, 250 bucks. Let's just call the net, I don't know. Let's even include a parking spot for this one, $3,600 for the car for the month. And again, I was not even living in San Diego at the time this was happening. I was managing the business on the back end. And so I didn't do any physical labor whatsoever for this. And when it comes to coordinating and back end work, yeah, I put in a few hours a day, but it was really minimal work. And so these are the kind of numbers we're working with here, which are looking pretty good, right? I mean, people work a whole month to make $3,600. If you can do that with one car, everything is outsourced. That's great. Maybe it's a little bit less with some labor costs, but at the end of the day, you're doing very, very minimal work for these kinds of numbers. So now let's go into another vehicle. Now we're getting into a Corvette C8 that we had. This car didn't do much at all. This is on a 50-50. Corvette C8's usually at least 60-40, but 50-50 preferred. So the car, let's call it $1,050 for the month. I believe this is the one that we brought to Wilmington, North Carolina. So we were testing a new market. So let's just call it $525 to the owner and $525 to the company. Expenses, it literally had one rental. I think I did this one myself. I did do this one myself. So the expenses were maybe one car wash, which I think was $15. And so we can call company, and when I refer to net here, I'm talking like the company's net, right? So, and if you don't know what net is, just your profit, what you're taking home, putting in your pocket at the end of the day. Let's call it $510 for this car for one rental. So this is maybe 1 hour of work, made us $500 profit. Now we're gonna get into one of our other Corvettes. We had a bunch of them. So this is again on a 50-50 split. So this Corvette made about $4,080 for the month. This was obviously one in our San Diego location. This was a Z51. I mean, the numbers on this is, you cannot argue this. If you buy one of these, your payment's probably $1,500 a month, right? So keep in mind when you're buying these cars, look at these net numbers. Obviously this car wasn't in operation a full month, but even on a 600 LT, on a Huracán Evo, your payment's maybe $4 or $5K a month. And so very, very good numbers. So the owner's cut is about $2,040. And then the company makes about $2,040. Again, I'm not gonna get into expenses on every single vehicle, but if we're looking at it, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rentals. So yeah, we're looking at 5 rentals. One of them is a broker rental, so there's no work involved. We leave the car dirty for the broker. We just leave the key for them. They come pick it up. So literally no work involved. So we have maybe expenses involving 4 rentals. Maybe some of them my business partner did. Maybe some of them our employees did. Nonetheless, this car did pretty good, right? Just, again, the numbers change. Once you're growing a big operation, you're gonna pay for parking, office, labor, all these things outsourced. When you're doing it by yourself in the beginning as you're scaling, you're gonna have almost no expenses whatsoever. So let's get into the next vehicle. We have this AMG GTC Roadster. This car, I already looked at the spreadsheet before doing this video. This car was out of commission that month. It had some warranty repairs. So let's look at some of our Aston Martins that we had. Okay, so if we're looking at the month of May, this car was on a 60-40 split. The spreadsheet's a little bit messy, but the owner made $2,247. So this was our blue Aston Martin Vantage. These cars are very cheap as well. Now you can get them for like $80,000. For the ease of this video, $2,250. So let me do the math real quick. So the total was about $3,450. So with some quick math, the company's cut was about $1,200 for the month. I will throw some expenses in there so that we can kind of balance these out a little bit. So I might go back in here and let's just put like $500 for the sake of it. We can get into this a little bit better when we do the bank statements, right? Because you can kind of see what's coming out of the business. But essentially this had 1, 2, 3, 4 rentals. So if the mobile detailer is doing the car wash, that's $100 for that. So, you know, we're going on $100 for car washing. Let's say it's 4 hours of labor, it's another $80. And let's say we throw in one parking spot for this one to kind of balance it all out. We're looking at about $870 profit. Again, this is with pretty much all the expenses included on this vehicle, all variable expenses, absolutely no labor. You're not even touching the car with this number. Now we have another Aston Martin. This is our silver Aston Martin Vantage. Again, no insurance. We're just responsible for the parking spot, labor, our actual operational expenses. There's nothing involved. Now, if you had owned this vehicle, this would be your total. The insurance on this car, I actually know the number was around $300 a month. And the payments, you know, if you're financing something like this, maybe $1,500 or so, maybe give or take. So still making a very good profit. Obviously the owner is still in profit, making passive income and building equity in the vehicle. So now let's dive into the silver Aston Martin. This one tend to do less numbers. Okay, actually did pretty good. This was another 60-40 split. As you can see, there's random stuff in here. Sometimes we would take expenses for the owner. We would go get a registration sticker and then just bill them that, right? And so the car made almost $2,700 just for the owner alone. Going back to the blue Aston Martin Vantage, I realized I didn't do a 60-40 percentage. It was 35. So you can add a little bit more to this number. For this one, we'll do it on a 60-40 split. That means this car did about $4,500. That means this car actually a little bit more since I made an error. And that means the company cut is $1,800. Again, we can do some rough numbers on variable expenses, obviously fixed costs. I'm not doing for the sake of this when we're going per vehicle, but we have 1, 2, 3 rentals. 2 of them are brokers. It's nothing for those. So even at 3 hours of labor, roughly $60 maybe. Let's call it even a parking spot on this one, $210. That is about $1,600 profit. Again, you are not touching the car. $1,600 profit. Very good. If you're doing it all yourself, obviously you make a little bit more, and that's okay when you're starting out. Now let's get into the Audi SQ8. There are a few vehicles on here that are a little bit lower end. They didn't perform as well, so I'm not going to go and include these in this video because it's just going to make it too long and too boring for you. Now we have another Corvette C8 that I'm going to be adding in here for the month of May. This car is on a 65-35. The owner made about $3,150. And also when we're going over these owners' numbers, you can see how, especially some of these vehicles, and owners understand fluctuations. It's very, very good return on investment for people that want to buy these vehicles. So when people are questioning, well, why would someone even want to buy an expensive car for me to rent out? Well, here's why. Someone made over $3,000 renting out their Corvette with you, and they didn't even touch the car. They didn't do anything. They drove it when they wanted to drive it. That's it. And they made over $3,000. If their payment was $1,500, insurance another couple hundred, they're making good money and they're paying the car off. So that is exactly why people want to give you their cars to rent out. That means this car did about $4,850 total after processing fees. And that means the company's cut on this is about $1,700. Again, we can throw in some expenses. Let's call it, I don't know, $300 to offset some of the other ones. Like I know these are sloppy numbers just to give you precise breakdowns, but I don't want to make this video a 3-hour college lecture. So this is $1,400 given you're paying for a parking spot and you are not paying for any labor. Obviously there's going to be fixed expenses that are going to come out as well, but these are pretty good numbers for not doing anything besides some of the back end stuff, which you can do anywhere. You can travel while you're doing this. Again, I was living in a different state at the time of these numbers were happening. Now we're going to get into the Ferrari California T. Let's see what that car did in the month of May. Owner made about $3,200. Looks like we were renting it at some low rates for some reason. That's okay. Sometimes that happens. And sometimes when we talk about expenses, the labor expenses vary because sometimes some of these spreadsheets, a lot of these numbers could just be over mileage, which require no extra labor, right? And so labor sometimes is very limited. Sometimes it's a lot more intensive for certain vehicles. It just varies by the month. This car made about $5,000 total. That means our company cut was about $1,800. Expenses for this, let's call it $150. Again, we're not paying parking spots for every single car, right? And so maybe about $1,650 profit for this car for the month. Now we're looking at a G550. And again, there's a lot of variables with these cars as well. For this one particular, the owner always blocked the car off. He actually did some unprofessional stuff. He made us get the car back during a rental before, and he would tell us to reject renters all the time after they were already booked. And so the owner did about $1,500 for the month of May. Guaranteed it was blocked off for a good amount of the time. So the total that it brought in was about $2,300. That means our cut was about $800. Not gonna put parking. It was 2 rentals for labor, maybe 50 bucks. Let's call it 50 bucks for washes, and let's just call it 100 bucks. That's including labor, not touching the car at all. $700 profit to handle 2 rentals, maybe texting someone, maybe doing a contract if you don't have a VA, and minimal work to make 700 bucks. Now we have another Huracán Evo. This one is a coupe that we had on the fleet. This car made the owner, the Evo coupe, about $3,000 for the month. What I will note is, again, there's nuances with every vehicle. This came from a formal rental company, and so they still had rentals to finish out. And this was actually the second month that we had the car. So there's guaranteed other rentals that went on that the other company had already signed. And so we didn't get a cut of that. They just took care of the rentals, and that's okay. Eventually all of that came to us. So looking at these rough numbers, this was maybe about $4,800 in total just from our company, meaning we took about $1,800 profit on this car. Expenses, $150 parking, maybe there was about 4 rentals, so let's call it, you know, another $200 in expenses. So let's call it $350. Again, that's not touching the car at all, and you have a parking garage setup. So we're looking at about $1,450 in profit. And I will note, most of these vehicles, although owners do sometimes take them out for drives, we had a requirement at this point in stage of business that the car be housed with us full time, unless the owners were taking it for a couple of days, but they would have to bring it back to us. There was no jumping around to people's houses to pick up the cars and running around like a chicken with their heads cut off, running all around town trying to figure this out. Next is our Lamborghini Huracán Spider. I know we have an Evo Spider and we had a regular Huracán Spider, so we had a total of 3 Huracans, the Evo Spider, Evo Coupe, and then we had the regular Spider. The owner did just over $5,000. Let's call it $5,100. So the total that this car netted was about $7,900 for a base Huracán Spider. That means we as a company made about $2,800 just on this one vehicle. I'm just gonna go ahead and leave this one blank because it will probably average out. And if you're doing this on your own, these are not expenses that you really have to worry about. Now I'm gonna be adding our Lamborghini Urus. This is a wide body Urus. This car did absolutely bonkers in this month. And don't take these numbers for face value on the cars that you should buy. They're gonna depend within your market. And things that you have to note is that sometimes cars just have a good month. This went out on a, pretty much was gone the whole month. And so I would not want you to go and buy a Lamborghini Urus in your first month. You're like, well, why didn't my Lamborghini Urus do these kinds of numbers? I saw it on this guy's video. It's gonna depend month per month. So this went out on a longer term rental. As you can see, this client paid over $15,000 to have the car for about 3 weeks. And so the total that this car brought in for the owner was about $11,000. The car did about $16,500. That means our cut was about $5,500. It only went on 2 rentals. One was a 3-week rental. The client actually ended up getting the car again. But what you have to notice, there is no expenses involved in this. We can throw a couple bucks at it, but at the end of the day, this car made us $5,500 in profit. Okay, then we had another Lamborghini wide body Urus, guys. So we had a yellow one and we had a black one. Funny enough, both of them had full exhausts and they were both tuned. How we ended up with that, I don't know. But we didn't have to buy them, right? So we had this car. These are all 35% splits. Again, our investor network shrunk. And so our percentages shrunk, but it made it so much easier to run the business because a lot of these people don't even drive their cars. They're purely for business with us. And so it alleviates a lot of headache and it brings a lot of predictability. So sometimes it's worth going 35, 65. But again, the owner did about $4,000 for the month for this car. That was for half of the month. The owner only rented this car out for half of the month and made $4,000. We had just received the car that month, and so this was a brand new Urus on our fleet. This car did about $6,200 total for half a month. That is not bad at all. This car actually ended up months after that, before I left the business, was doing really, really well. So that's $2,200 for this Urus for the company's net. This was for 2 rentals. One of them was a broker, almost no expenses. Let's call it a parking spot, maybe a wash 1 hour of labor. So we make about 2K just on this one Urus. Almost no work at all. Next, we have the Audi R8 V10. This car started dropping off a little bit in performance. This was our 4th year on the car. And so let's just say the owner was able to pay the car off in full through our rental activities. The owner only made about $1,100 this month. That means the car netted $2,200. We did have this car on a 50/50. And so we made about $1,100. Again, that was only a couple of rentals. Let's throw in a couple $100 in expenses just to be, fair. So that's another $900 to the bottom line. There's not much expenses involved. They're very predictable. Unless you start adding a lot of labor and you're really missing things, gas, mileages, other things like that, you are going to be very predictable within your numbers. Here we have another one. We actually had a Ferrari 488 coupe come to us. This was, again, another investor that had multiple vehicles with us. We did not have this car for the full month. I think we technically did, but I think the owner enjoyed it for a couple of weeks before he handed it over to us. The owner did about $5,000. You can see it here in the spreadsheet, just so you know I'm not making up numbers. Owner made about $5,000. That means the total was about $7,800. Just throwing out rough numbers here. So that means we made about $2,800. Let's throw another parking spot in there. And maybe 4 car washes, $100, labor. Let's throw $350 in expenses just to leave a little buffer. That leaves us, let's just call it 2,400, give it even more of a buffer to be realistic. So for the sake of this video, I'm not going to jump into every single car, and I am missing some data to be sure. There is a couple of Corvettes that I'm missing for sure, because we had about 5 on the fleet at this time. So there's a couple there that I'm missing, and there is definitely a couple of other cars that are not included, and then any cars that we own are not included in this, right? So let's look at these numbers. We are netting about $36,000. That's after pretty much all variable expenses. The only other expenses not included in here would be our office, which was about $1,800. And then I have included a good amount of parking spaces here out of the 10. And so I included labor, I included car washes, Lyfts and Ubers were usually offset by delivery fees, which again are $120, sometimes $150, sometimes $200, depending on the distance within our city. I know for a fact there was a couple of these just when I was going through these sheets that had like $200 delivery fees. So Ubers and Lyfts are offset if we use 2 employees, which we had multiple employees, and they were doing the runs back and forth, and there was a little bit of gas and then a little bit extra labor, but that was offset by the delivery, usually resulting in a little more profit for us in regards to deliveries. So we're looking at 36,000. So even if we throw in our office expense, which was every month, right? $1,800, our DocuSign averaged to about, man, we spent like $5,000 a year on it. So let's just call it like $450 a month on DocuSign. And then you have to factor in for things like, other business expenses such as accounting, which would cost us a couple $1,000s in April. And then, usually we pay the state like $5,000 on top of that. And so, maybe let's throw in another $1,000 in miscellaneous expenses. And so our net on this 36,000, which does not include everything, it's about $33,000. This is with almost not touching anything, mostly doing back end work. Let's look at what the total numbers were that these brought in. So if we're looking at the rough numbers here, obviously when you see our deposit statements, it was at 121,000 for the month. It looks like from these numbers added up here, it's about 105,000. So I told you there was cash that's not going to be included, crypto that's not going to be included. There's other data missing. So we actually took more than 120,000, especially with some accounts receivables. It was probably closer to 150,000 for the month. But again, there's data missing here. So this bottom line is actually a little bit more. And maybe there's a couple of little expenses that we did not account for. But as you can see, I've now went through this whole thing. I didn't pre-plan this. I literally just picked off the spreadsheets and went into our kind of total numbers here, our total net. And then I went into kind of our profit net margins. And as you can see, it is roughly 30%, as I had mentioned in the beginning of the video, because that is generally what our profit margins were. So now if we go back to the bank statements for the month of May, you can see the total deposits, 120,000. And you can see we do a lot of Zelle payments. For some reason we had a chargeback here. I think we fought this one. We didn't actually get a lot of chargebacks in the business, so it's funny enough that it came up in this video. But we had, this is some of our employee pay. So you can see here, we paid our employee $900. This was typically for a 2-week period. And then there's some processing fees that were coming out of the business. And then as you could say, we're paying our investors, right? So we're paying one investor $2,100, paying one investor $5,000, paying one, and then we're doing some bank transfers to other savings accounts. So we put $10,000 in the savings savings account. Here you can see our credit card statement. You can see our expenses for the month were about $15,000. You're gonna be like, well, that's nothing that what you just talked about in this video. What you have to note is that, first of all, we were doing so much volume and we were handling so many cars that there were some expenses I probably didn't disclose. The other thing is, on a lot of these spreadsheets, you maybe caught glimpses of it, is we would pay pretty much all repairs for vehicle owners, and then we just bill them at the end of the month. So that wide body black Urus that we got in, that came with a dead battery. That had a serious issue. Went into the shop, we paid $5,000 to get that car fixed. Obviously we billed the owner for it, but at the end of the day, that's what's reflected in this credit card statement. Then you can see a lot more Zelle payments for labors, some Uber reimbursements for our 1099 workers, and we actually paid to ship out a vehicle. We shipped 2 cars to North Carolina, so an Audi R8 and a Volkswagen Tiguan, so that was over $3,000 as well. But generally these are not expenses you're gonna be incurring all the time, right? We were opening up a second location, and those were just some expenses that were involved by doing that. Then there's some payments sent out. Maybe we paid a broker here for $1,600, or we paid ourselves or something like that. But as you can see, you can kind of take a look here at kind of our balances throughout the month. And at the end of the month, we had almost $70,000 left in the bank account. Again, some of this ended up going to investors, but there is a good chance we had somewhere between $35,000 to $40,000 after we paid the rest of the investors for the month. And so, yeah, this is pretty much the breakdown of the video. And now you know the exact numbers that go behind a profitable car rental business. If you're interested in working with us to help build or scale your car rental business, I do a limited number of one-on-one strategy calls. In these calls, we'll map out your best starter vehicles, pricing, renter screening rules, deposit structures, and your first 60-day plans. Click the first link in the description to book that call with me, and I'll speak to you very soon. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. Please go check out other videos on my page that are very informative when it comes to car rental business, and we'll see you in the next video.